And thank you, Diane.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. But anyway, so the economy in the tank, and it's not going to get any better. Coming up at the end of this month, it might be a few days after the end of the month, we'll get the national report, which will probably point to recession. Likely that the market will drop further and faster when that report is given, which means the TSP will react accordingly. Right now, as of today, the Dow since January 1 has dropped over 5,000 points. It's about a 14% drop in its value, and the TSP at this, well, as of last Friday, the C fund year to date is down 17.51. That's a negative. And the S fund is down 24.96, a negative. All L funds are negative. Our only positive is the G fund. Here's a time when the federal employees are almost frozen in place. That doesn't mean they won't move, but we have to be compelling and to offer perhaps an interest rate, for growth isn't a good time because people are probably not listening because the economy doesn't offer a good interest rate return. Guaranteed income, that could sound pretty good. And a guaranteed rate of return can sound pretty good, and that means MIGA. So do keep MIGA in mind, depending on where they are and depending on the term that they may choose. MIGAs right now are offering 4%. So 4% may sound pretty good in the light of a negative 24.96. I mean, that's almost 30-point difference. So it could sound pretty good.
Some people want to go a shorter term on a MIGA because they think what happens if the market goes back up? They can get over 2.5% for 2 years now on some of these.
Yeah, and it's something I think will be changing probably on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
But I think that in a general sense, we could offer in the neighborhood of 3, if we were to say 3%, give or take.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be worried about saying 3 to 4.
Yeah.
And then if they want to go back to 2 years because they're worried, then they go back to 250, 275.
Yeah. Again, the depends on the term they choose.
Yeah.
And so someone, to someone, and let's just suppose that it's that one deal out of a year that you're having problems with. Offering the guarantee might make a deal, and a smaller commission is better than zero commission. And if we can convince them on a relatively short term, that means a sale later on because now they're your customer and you've taken care of them. So do keep the MIGAs in mind. Another issue is not only what is an answer for today, but an answer for tomorrow. Whether we had a good economy or a bad economy, the TSP is just an awful place to keep your money for the rest of your life. One is the management of it. We tried to tell folks in our teleseminars of self-management and the importance of it. And some people are, and some people are not. Right now, and I don't have the percentage, but it's pretty close to about 90% of all TSP holders are now in the G fund. I don't know if anybody knew that. So I think people are self-managing. They've taken a huge hit in their other funds in order to arrive at the decision to make that move. There's some sort of rumor that if you move out of the C fund when they're experiencing loss, that you will have locked in your losses. Well, I don't know what that means. I don't know who started that. It's some of these things are years in the reputation history culture of some of these agencies. How can you lock in your loss if you move into the G fund? Because when things are looking better, you move back from the G fund back into the C fund and enjoy some gains that you might be experiencing at that time. So, these are things that are being said, and people are making decisions based on this false information.
Well, that's the George, pardon me interrupting, but that's the old line of the Charles Schwab and the stockbrokers and the guys sell mutual funds. And there's some truth to that. But what they fail to tell you is it could keep going down too.
Well, there is truth to sticking with it. So if you're a 25-year-old and you've got 20 years to go in your until retirement, and if you're, say, in one of the L funds, if you look at the history and long term, yes, there will be recovery. So these things are maybe a bee sting to experience some of these losses now. The history has proven that out, but that's not who we're talking to. For the most part, we're talking to people that are down to 2, 3, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah,
And
that's just the cliche of the stockbrokers and mutual fund guys.
That's right, and they listen to that.
Yeah.
When you talk about stockbrokers, my first thought comes to Ken Fisher, and Ken Fisher is telling folks, you don't want annuities. Oh, they're terrible, and they're full of these hidden fees, and you'll never really get the gains that you are supposed to experience, and blah, 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 blah. But then, so I've got a $375,000 TSP, and I'm listening to Ken Fisher. So I think, oh, well, he's the guy. So I call Ken Fisher and I say, I've got a $375,000 TSP, and I'm hearing what you're saying. I don't want any of those darn dirty annuities. And Ken Fisher said, well, you're under $500,000. I'm not going to talk to you. He won't talk to anybody under 500,000. So he's eliminated an option for people to secure their principal and possibly that future income and return.
You also forgot to tell him he has fees too. He just calls it something different.
I'm sorry, what?
He also forgets to tell him that he has fees also. He just calls it something different.
Yeah, right. And so, he's I would call him an arch enemy, because he's muddying our waters before we could even get to somebody. But I can tell usually myself when I'm talking to somebody if they've been listening to Fisher, because they use his words.
Yeah,
and so we have to be ready to combat that. Now, one of the important things, whether we're in good times or bad times, an important factor for our TSP friends is beneficiary. And I've harped on this a lot, and I'll continue to harp on it. In terms of the beneficiary, the TSP is the most awful place you can be. Not everyone has a responsible kid or even a responsible wife. And so I think an interview that asks certain questions. First of all, who currently is managing your TSP? Well, I've had people say, "Oh, my husband does." Okay, well, that's fine. That's good. What happens if he dies first? Then who's going to manage your TSP? Well, I don't know. Here's an opportunity, an opening for us to talk about how by making a switch, you don't have to manage anymore. Another thing relative to management is within the TSP. What if there was a simultaneous death, husband and wife killed in an automobile accident? Tell me about your kids. Well, when I talk to people about kids, and their kids can be as young as 15 years old and as old as 30 and 40 years old. But the question should be, how responsible are they relative to money? And in many cases, surprisingly so, people will, even people I've not spoken to in the past, will admit, well, my daughter spends money like there's no tomorrow. Or my son had a drug problem a couple of years ago, but we think that he's on the mend. All right. Can you imagine a 19 or 20-year-old young man who has had a drug problem suddenly getting a check for $500,000 or 200,000, even $75,000? What does that mean? That's a death sentence. And so, what's the answer? Well, first of all, the TSP is not the answer. Uh, we have made arrangements now, and we can offer a trust. We can offer a trust, and it's probably more likely if the TSP balance is big, 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 $1 million perhaps. But we can take in any size, even down to $50,000, which is unusual for a trust. If one needs a trust or feels that they need a trust, then here's your two options. One is find a friend or a relative who will act as trustee and take care of your son or daughter for a number of years. But if there's a non-institutional trustee, that doesn't mean that they will manage it well. It doesn't mean that they will have your best interest. And they might say, well, the kid's 35 years old now. He's been pretty good for 10 years. I'll just go ahead and write him a check. So if it's non-institutional, and it's likely to not be managed as you wish, and it certainly can't go on from generation to generation. Here's an opportunity for an institutional trust that if the dollars warrant, such as $1 million or greater, they can actually set it up for, and it depends on what state, but we can set it up for 360 years or forever. And so, just like the Kennedy Trust takes care of all the nieces and nephews and in-laws and everybody else in will forever and ever and ever. No Kennedy has any money. It's all in the trust. So this could be a real concern with somebody who has some higher dollars, especially if they're dollars that came at great sacrifice, and they have any concerns with the eventual beneficiaries, and if they want to pass it on to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, they can do that if the dollar amount warrants. In other words, if we can see growth in the trust, then it's likely to go on for many, many generations. So these are things that are of great importance. We do know that if there is a beneficiary who is a spouse, they may continue on and are not under the restriction of a 10-year cash out. But if it goes to the children, grandchildren, uncle, aunt, brother, sister, any human being who is not a spouse, then the requirement is that they are going to pay. It doesn't matter about the money coming out, but they have to pay the full taxes within 10 years. That could become quite the burden, especially if they kind of wait. They're going to just sit on it and let growth happen. And then next thing you know, they've got really a heavy tax burden. So the trust might be a way to go. It doesn't mean that they are going to be tax-free or tax-deferred, because a trust might require the taxes be paid now, but that means forever growth and forever benefit. So we've made contact with a trust company who's accepted our terms, and so anybody that's got any kind of a situation, give me a shout, and we'll work with you and make a connection with the trust company for that. Phyllis worked with Charitable Remainder Trust in the past. This trust does have available Charitable Remainder Trust, but it's a charity of your choice. So the one that Phyllis, I believe that you worked with in the past, was a particular charity that was restricted, I think, to one or two or charities or that they had on their list. But this would be a church or charity of the person's choice. So they may have a particular church and they want to they want to make sure that the church gets some money, but they want the child to get some income. Can do. Also, this can be worked in conjunction if the person qualifies with a life insurance policy that could be geared to the potential tax liability. So if that tax liability looks like it'd be $100,000, a life insurance policy means that they could virtually cash in on the qualified, pay those taxes. That money could go into the trust, and now it's all going to grow relatively tax-free. So, I mean, there's a number of ways to work this. We haven't done any yet because we just made this arrangement, but I'm really eager to start offering this to some people. Could be complicated, so if you've got somebody that has an issue, I would not offer a solution, but let's engage in a conference call, and we can talk about using the trust, perhaps a trust, as our eventual answer to their problem. Is there any questions on that? Okay. VA closures. A couple of months ago, we got notice that there was something like 35 or 40 various VA facilities that were going to be closed, plus a lot of the local VA offices that are small clinics and administrative offices. That's been put on hold. So if you're talking to anybody that's with VA that is concerned that perhaps they might be involved in a closure, it's been put on temporary hold. The reason for that is that the Senate, in looking at this, has found that the process is flawed. I don't know what that flaw means, but the process is flawed, and that they're holding up any kind of VA closures until they've got that resolved. A lot of talking. Anybody got any issues or questions or cases you're working on that you'd like to visit with us right now?
George, the NAIC best interest model is being adopted everywhere by every state. Do we have a standard fact-finding form that we can fill out to show that we ask all the right questions to act in the customer's best interest?
I believe we do. I would ask for you to hold on that.
Yeah, I'm not expecting one to.
Yeah,
and I really am not too concerned about it, other than the one time somebody says you didn't act in mama's best interest and I would have had more money.
yeah. Well, first of all, the suitability is meant to answer that. And,
exactly. That's what I thought too. And I talked to Shannon about it. She said there's an 8424 form we signed. I just signed one for that annuity, and she thinks that's good enough, but give some thought to that.
Yeah, I haven't seen any big stink raised over that yet.
Well, hadn't had time yet. It won't be from a customer, it'll be from their kids or grandkids.
Well, I think the company's got our back on that, but I think that a substantial form, could be a good defense in that liability.
Just a fact finder form of, you ask this question, what do you want to do with this money? What do you want better picture? What do you want? And
yeah, and I kind of like that, because if we do ask those questions, then that gives us more material to certainly act in their best interests. And
exactly. And it also gives us opportunities to talk about other things.
Well, we are a fiduciary.
Yes.
A few years ago, the DOL came out and we all know that story. And Ken Fisher, going back to that devil, he talks about he is a fiduciary, just like he's the only fiduciary out there, meaning not the handling of money, but on the side of the best interest of the client. We, to my knowledge, everyone we've worked with has always acted in the best interest of the client, because that's our best interest as well.
Sure.
And so a more comprehensive fact finder than our own data sheet, I think, would be certainly worthwhile. So thanks for bringing that up. And I think that's a worthy subject that we can put our heads together on and see what we come up with. We do have one. I know we have one. I just don't
Yeah,
know where
and
it
you know,
is.
it's just, it probably will evolve and grow over the years. But I'm not worried about some lady that we just closed to put her money in an annuity. It's the kids and the grandkids that are greedy that you have to worry about.
Well, let me tell you, I've had personal experience with the kids and grandkids, and I'll bore you with just a quick minute or two here. A few years ago, in fact, I record everything. I write down, and I've still got paper files, and I'll print out, certain emails, and I'll put it in my paper file. And I know that's old fashioned, but let me tell you why. A few years ago, I get a letter from the Department of Insurance, state of California, state of Washington, and it says, your customer, Joe Blow, blah, 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 you forced him into this transaction. You put high pressure on him. You did this and this and this and this and this. And I have to look to see, is this my name at the top of here? And it was. And I had met with this guy 5, 6 times at his house, had him, his wife, his kids, his family, all sitting around chairs and on the couch. I conducted a mini seminar, and it was decided that we would go forward. So this has really amazed me. So I took the rest of the day, and I put together a binder, a 3-ring binder about this thick of documentation of correspondence. I had it sectioned off. Here's the original conversation. Here's the product transaction. Here's the after sale conversations I had through email, and then I summarized verbal conversations. And that afternoon, I sent it by FedEx to the investigator. And later, when all this was over, that investigator said, George, I have never received a more complete response as quickly as yours. And the result was, the guy that made the complaint did not make the complaint. It was his son.
Yeah, it's always the kids.
Yeah,
Kids or grandkids.
who thought I was trying to, get him out of the loop in terms of future inheritance. So they filed charges against him, and I got an apology from the state of Washington for that. I called the inspector, and that's when he told me that they'd never received a response so quickly and so thorough. I called him, and I said, well, I have one question. In the future, if it says, have you ever had a complaint against you? Do I say yes or do I say no? He says, you tell him no, because this was a false complaint. We'll record it accordingly. So if somebody picks it up somewhere, just refer them to the state and they'll say that. So having said that, we need to look at every transaction. I mean, this particular one I was telling you about, the guy was happy, the family was happy, everybody's happy, happy, happy. We all had happy faces. There was no way I could have anticipated any kind of a blowback or a complaint or a liability out of this particular transaction. So we have to look at every transaction as a potential liability and protect ourselves from the very beginning. Going in, we have to protect
That's
ourselves.
right.
And
we have to ask the question, long-term care. The first one I heard was children sued a broker that if they had signed their mother up for long-term care, their inheritance would have been higher, and they won.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that brings a good point. In fact, I think I'm going to make this a matter of my kind of a little bit of a study and put together some sort of response to this. But there's a couple questions that need to be asked. One is, what are the plans in place or the plans for the future in terms of long-term care?
Exactly.
And
That's all you got to ask.
yes,
And whatever they say, write it down.
yes, and I'll tell you, there's a chance for a sale there too.
Sure there.
But let me come back to it. And the second one is, do you have your legal documents, your essential documents in place? That means your will, your power of attorneys, your final directives. Are they in place, or do you have plans for that? No, we don't. Well, then we must tell them that we recommend that you make an appointment with a legal counsel immediately and put those plans in place. I have a client I'm working with right now who does not have one. She has no family. She has no children, and she has no will. And she's got close to $1 million in cash and cash equivalents. So we have to address that. And if we don't address that, we're not planners. We're not financial experts. We're salesmen. We're trying to sell the annuity, and to hell with the rest of you. That's not who we are. When we brought you folks on, we did not believe that that's who you are. But I think we've become a little complacent, and unless we keep our planner hat on, we're going to forget these things, and where we forget these things becomes a chink in our armor, and that chink in our armor will eventually come back to bite us. It may be one case out of a career, but that will happen. And how do we defend ourselves if we didn't ask about the long-term care? Now, their answer is their answer. We've taken care of, we don't want it, whatever. Record it, make sure it's part of your records. In fact, we should know that and put it in our records as well. So you're talking to Joe Smith. You've asked the question, and he said that you should make sure that we have a file on that guy, and that the question was asked. So I would make it a routine on anyone you're working with, somebody who's a lead. Excuse me, somebody who's a lead. Maybe we will work with them in the future. Maybe we won't. I'm not quite sure. We need to record that because we haven't done any transaction. But if it looks like we're going to be doing a transaction, whether it's the smallest of annuities or the biggest of life insurance policies, I think that should become a matter of your own personal policy. And I'd like to make it part of our policy as well, so that you can defend it, because we're upline. I think that we would be sharing some of that liability in the event that happens. So anyway, that's my personal experience, and I think I'm going to work on that. It may not be this week. Give me a few weeks to work on it and come up with something on that, a directive of sorts that you can follow. Any questions? Pretty silent out there.
No, it's very thorough, George. Thank you.
Well, thank
Everything
you.
okay at Ken's?
We'll find out, and if it's all certainly very private, and I'm sure he'll report to you what he can or is willing to report. But he's got he's got his wife, he's got his grandson, he's got his son, he's got. Seems like everybody's coming down with separate and major.
Yeah, we talk
issues.
about what can happen to you when you get old, and here we are looking right at it.
Well, let's take a moment here. Let's talk about this. No one could have anticipated any of this happening.
No.
As some of you know, I've had personal experience where my former wife she was 57 at the time, healthy. She walked from the ferry up the hill to 11th Street in Seattle, where she worked at the Swedish hospital. She'd been working there for 20 some years and walked it every day, up and down. Just finished her physical and passed it quadruple A in every regard. No cholesterol, blood pressure, nothing going on, cancer, nothing. Anyway, So one day I got a call from a nurse, and they said that she had collapsed. They sent her to emergency. I went to emergency before we got the results of an initial X-ray, and that X-ray showed a brain tumor about the size of an orange. And later, a week or so later, it was diagnosed as glioblastoma, which is a death sentence. And she was given 6 months to 18 months to live, and she survived 9 years. So I was a caregiver as Ken is today. And that morning, we shared a cup of coffee and some breakfast, kissed goodbye like we had a million times, and our life changed at 10 o'clock in the morning. That can happen to your client, Joe Blow. And if you want to relate that story, that's fine. It was not a slow coming on like Ken's wife with dementia. It was immediate, sudden, a phone call, and our life changed. And so if you want to use that story, you're certainly welcome to. But not just my story, but others, everybody, anybody that is got a family member or even a distant family member that's got a serious illness, and especially a sudden illness, we can use those things as a kind of an example to bring forth some of these products. We've got annuities that provide double the income with long-term care. My goodness, who wouldn't jump at that? We have One America and products like that, excuse me, that offer, excuse me, that offer a life insurance policy with long-term care. Long-term care, traditional, I can understand reluctance because the premiums are high, they go up, and it seems like everybody's canceling out eventually. And so all that money is wasted. I understand that. But also, and I believe you all know this, but we also have Medicaid planning, and that's pre-planning and that's post-planning. And that means that if somebody's anticipating an illness or just wants to protect themselves, we can pre-plan. If somebody already has a spouse who is ill, excuse me, with dementia, or some sort of a long-term illness, such as.
That look like Asia?
Hi. But something such as a long-term illness like Lou Gehrig's or Parkinson's, we can preserve their principal. They do not have to pay out of the pocket or quote do the spend down like the state would recommend. What we find is 99% of law firms who are elder law do not know how to do Medicaid planning. I don't know that's an exact number, but a high number do not know about it because they've shied away from it, or they just never gone there, or they never had a client, but they don't know about it. Within each state, there are experts, and we can identify those experts. Are you signaling to me, Richard?
No, can you see me?
Yeah, I was seeing two fingers. I thought you said we got 2 minutes left. I don't know.
No,
But
sorry.
But
I was signaling to my wife what I wanted.
Okay. What for those of you who aren't aware of Medicaid planning, then perhaps let me know. We can do a one-on-one, or we can even put together a Medicaid planning presentation here, or we can do a video. I don't have a particular plan for it right now, but especially if you have somebody who has, and here again, we go back to the fact finder. someone's got a spouse who is entering dementia or Lou Gehrig's or something like that, we need to bring this up to them because um, because this could be saving their financial life, not only for the spouse, but for the children. And I've talked about this case many times. It was one of my first cases 20 some years ago, but sitting with a client that had only a small $25,000 annuity that I had written. And so we were looking at, uh, they had a little bit of extra money. So I made an appointment with them, went out. And when I got there, the husband was woefully unaware of what money they had. The wife had always taken care of things. And she couldn't remember. And I said to him later, I said, is there a problem with her? And he says, she is losing her memory and very quickly. So I asked him about care, and he says, well, I don't know what I'm going to do about care, but I don't think we can afford it. So I asked him to keep all mail in one place that comes from anywhere financial, such as a bank or broker or insurance or anything. And I'll come back in 30 days and we'll go through the mail. Long story short, they had $1 million in the bank. So I put together a Medicaid plan. She went to a Medicaid facility, which is not hard to find. And we preserved all that $1 million. Eventually she died, he died, and there was 2 children who inherited 50-50. Both of those children became my clients. So almost simultaneously, I wrote another $1 million using the same money as it circulated. And those 2 children have been my clients now for 20 years. And in time, we've written more and more. It's a good way to get business, and it's a good way to serve people. It does not pay, Medicaid does not pay a high commission. It's closer to being like a MIGA. But it's good business, it's good service, and it does help you in terms of referrals. It helps you in terms of continuing business from the family. You get to know the family very well because many times the older generation can't handle this transaction themselves, so the son or the daughter come in, and I've made sales to them. It's good business, and so I'll put together something relative to Medicaid. So I've got my marching orders on the
Hey,
fact
George,
finder and the Medicaid. Yes, sir.
what happened? I missed the first minute or two that brought up the conversation.
Well, we were talking about earlier in our meeting here. We were talking about a fact finder.
Yeah, I
And
heard that.
The more we know about someone, the more we can help.
Mhm.
Well, if we just ask the question, then somewhere, somebody's going to say, well, my wife is suffering from this illness, and perhaps it is dementia. A lot of that, of course, and that seems to be increasing. Sometimes it's like a Lou Gehrig's or Parkinson's disease. These are not quick illnesses that take our life, maybe like a heart attack. These are things that will linger for some time, which do require care. I won't speak for every state, but in the state of Washington, we have Medicaid that will pay for nursing homes. We have Medicaid that will pay for care at home. And so that I believe that's so in most states, if not all. And so if we're aware of it, then that changes the scope of what we're doing for these folks. We need to preserve the TSP or IRA or the 401k. We need to preserve those investment monies. Otherwise, their choice is that this person will start pulling money out of investments, pulling money out of the bank, diminishing their TSP, and in doing so at great expense, can then have a residual effect on taxation. Imagine if the primary asset is qualified money, they're pulling out $90,000 a year to take care of a dementia patient, which some states that could be as high as $90,000. $50,000 is for certain, and $90,000 is a grand possibility. Imagine pulling that out of your qualified money.
No,
So now
I
you're,
understand. Okay.
yeah,
I
yeah.
just thought somebody in the group had that problem. Okay.
Well, you know, if we were to talk to our group individually, I'm sure that within the family, somebody's got some illness. And as we know, Ken has family medical issues going on right now. And so it's not uncommon. And we may not find that out if we don't do a more in-depth fact finder. So
Got it.
anyway, and so Steve, you or anybody that's got any questions or has a particular case, I'm not going to try and teach you. I can do Medicaid in any state in the country, so just be aware. And if you've got somebody that's got a spouse, and I've talked about spouse, I've not talked about a single, but there is planning potential for singles, and that's more complicated, more long term. But for a spouse, and the whole idea is to preserve preserve this principle for the well spouse. We have two people: well spouse and ill spouse. The well spouse and the eventual family beneficiaries of that deserve to have this this money preserved. It's their life savings, and they didn't save it to spend on long-term care. So we can preserve that, and just about every state has got a program like this. And I say just about because I don't know intimately every single state. But if you have a case in Timbuktu, I can in 5 minutes tell you all about that particular state and what they will and won't do, and the dollars and so forth. So I'll put together a program, and we'll make this one of our training sessions that we have.
Ken, isn't a trust, obviously, if they have a trust 5 years or longer, that protects their estate, from Medicaid? Is that more?
Well, that could be, and that could be part of the pre-plan process, especially for singles. However, Mama falls ill today. She's diagnosed with Parkinson's, and she's expected to have a longevity of 10 to 20 years because the rest of her body is healthy, but now she's coming down with this Parkinson's. You cannot do a trust. And so the trust, see, there's what's called a look back. And so if you manipulate your resources for the purpose of this planning, then you have to do so 5 years ahead of time. And so a trust could be used if somebody, for instance, and I don't want to bring this out much longer, but as long as you're interested in listening. So let's suppose that Troy, you're one of your parents and your uncle and aunt, your grandparents, and this lineage, they had some sort of an illness such as Lou Gehrig's or let's say Parkinson's. And so you suspect that you could be a Parkinson's victim, but you're not suffering today. Well, then trust would work well. And we can help somebody with that pre-planning and the trust. We can do that regardless of the dollar amount. We could do it. But if somebody is ill and been ill for the last year, you're talking to somebody and they say, well, my wife's in a nursing home or we've got care coming in. How long has it been since she was diagnosed? Well, it's been a year and a half since she was diagnosed, and we've had care coming in. Well, we can fix that now with the Medicaid planning.
I see. Okay.
So I won't go into details of it because it's just keep your eyes open. That's all I'm asking. And then give me a call if we need to do that. And, a trust might work for the future, but that's not our immediate when we have a case such as that. Anything else?
That's it. Thank you for your leadership, George.
Well, yeah, thank you for, I want to thank you all for sticking with us. We've not had the easiest of times, especially with our lead generation. We're trying to work through it. You can't believe the time and the effort that we've been putting forth with trying to resolve this. So your sticking with us is very important to us, and we will find rewards for you when we finally come to the conclusion of what we can do relative to leads. The best lead, though, right now is one that you can generate yourself. That would come from anybody who is a current lead who might know somebody. You can reach out to local federal employees, such as the postmasters. Walk in, sit down and talk to them. If you've not done that, we do have a basic script and direction for you to follow. If you have anybody that works locally, such as a local VA hospital, sit down with them and find out who's running that joint, and can you go in and give a seminar on your federal retirement planning. So these are stronger leads than anything we can provide, because it's you personally generating them. And an example, and you know me, I can talk forever, but I do a lot of business down at BPA in Vancouver, Washington. That stands for the Bonneville Power Authority, which is part of the Department of Energy. And I've gone down there and gathered 30 and 40 people, bought them lunch. I ordered from Jimmy John, a variety of these little sandwiches, pile up a bunch of Cokes. The bill comes to $100 perhaps. And I sit down there and I give a seminar. And next thing you know, I'm getting a referral here, a referral there. A couple of these guys say, well, I'm 6 months away, and 6 months later, I'm putting a deal together. If you can have a good, friendly conversation by phone with anybody, tell them what you'd like to do, and we'll support you in that. And I'll direct for you. Hell, I'll even call Jimmy John and put the order in for you. So those are things that you can do by using some of your own brain power, and try to be effective in generating your own leads. Don't keep sitting back waiting for us. We're working hard to achieve that, but I can't tell you when we're going to have leads back up to 30 and 40 each for you. And the time that we had 640 leads was a fluke. We were able to get through, but they shut us off right after that. So our lead numbers are really low, and I apologize for that, but we're working on it every day.
George, give Ken our regards if you see him.
Say again?
Give Ken our regards if you see him.
Will do. I've talked so long here that you probably all wish I would just quit. So I'm gonna terminate here. If you individually have any questions or issues, especially things that we've talked about today, just reach out. We're here for you.
Here, George.
Anything else? Goomba.